Good morning. My name is Jon Kolko. Thank you very much for joining me. I want to talk today about great products. Could I please have my slides on the screen? I became interested in great products when I started working at a startup in the United States in Austin, Texas. The startup is called MyEDU, and we helped college students succeed in college and get a job. So I'll be happy to share that with you. Perhaps we could get my slides up. Thank you very much. That's what I was looking for. We'll be talking about how to use empathy to create products that people love. Okay? Where do great products come from? I want you to think about the products that you have in your lives, the products that you absolutely love, that you can't do without. And I think there's a couple different perspectives on where those come from. One perspective is that it comes from vision, and that there's a leader at the top of an organization who has sort of an autocratic say on what we will do, and people fall in line behind them. And when I talked to Joe Gebbia, who works at Airbnb, is one of the founders, he said, as a company, we certainly know where the product's going. We have a vision, a North Star that we're headed toward. And he described how his employees can articulate what that North Star is. They're very comfortable with describing where the company's going. A different perspective is that it comes from process. This is actually what I learned when I was in school, when I was in design school, is that if you have a rigorous process, a methodology, you'll get there. You'll get to great. And when I spent some time with Alex Reinert, who had many different things to say about sort of the fragility of the process, he said there's no real playbook for taking a startup idea, an entrepreneurial idea, and bringing it through fruition to a company. Nobody's really written the book on how to do that successfully, and so the process is one that is organic. There's a third perspective, which is just it's hard work. Okay, it takes a lot of time and a lot of hard work. And I talked to my friend Mark Phillip, who's the CEO of a company called Are You Watching This? If you're a sports fan, it will contact you at 3 or 4 in the morning to tell you that there's a wonderful game on and you better get up to watch it. Okay? And he talked about how he ran this company with 0 revenue for 7 years. Okay? That is what it took for him to get this company, which is now very successful, off the ground. Talk about hard work. Okay? 7 years of his life. At the center of this is an idea of product management. And I think product management is well known, at least we think it's well known, because it has a track record. But I'm talking about a slightly different form of product management that we'll talk about today. And it's a form that I started to understand as I spent time with leaders who are using this new form of empathetic product management to bring great products to market. And you may recognize some of these people. And so the ideas that you'll see are a synthesis of many of the ideas coming from people who are running the companies that have the great products that we love and that we use on a regular basis. And I want to articulate it in a very simple framework, okay? A very simple framework that starts with the idea of a vision. Someone has a great idea, but that vision doesn't necessarily have to come from the person at the top. There's a number of different outlets and avenues for great ideas. You have great ideas all the time. Great ideas are disposable because you have them and then you don't do anything about them and they disappear. So someone has a great idea and it doesn't disappear. And it doesn't disappear because they have the ability to drive consensus through a group. And that consensus might be a large group, an entire 100,000-person organization. It might be 2 people, co-founders. But they're able to get other people to see that vision and decide that it is, in fact, worthwhile. And the third step in this overly simplistic model is shipping a product. And you wouldn't think that I would even need to put that on the screen, because of course you need to ship the product. But if you evaluate your own history and your own track record with getting product out the door, I don't know how you're batting in terms of your average, but mine is very low. Okay, when I was a consultant, I didn't ship more products than I shipped, okay, because it's so difficult. And again, at the heart of this is a product. But what is a product has become amorphous. Because a product is no longer a chair or a coffee pot, okay? A product is something different. And so I want to present first an intellectual, conceptual idea of product. Okay, this is the academic part of the talk. And then second, a very, very practical view of how you could take my ideas, which are a synthesis of others' ideas, and implement them in your own companies. Okay? So first, the academic part. I think that product starts with an idea of something called product market fit. Okay? And to articulate what product market fit is, let's start with the notion of a broad technological and political infrastructure, like Uber. Okay? Uber has a broad financial infrastructure. But let me tell you a story about Uber in the United States. In my hometown, or my town, Austin, Texas, Uber just left. And they left very loudly because they spent $6 million on an advertising campaign to get the city council to pass ordinances so that drivers didn't have to have a fingerprint identification. Okay? And when they couldn't pass it, they left. And Uber has the infrastructure, the political clout to say, we're leaving. And it doesn't kill their company. But if you're a startup with 2 or 3 people or a small organization just beginning, you clearly can't say that. And so if your company is resting on the idea of legislation that doesn't exist or is tenuous, that's not a great way to ensure product market fit. The second idea of product market fit is focused around the notion of a social precedent. As I look around, I don't see anyone wearing Google Glass. In fact, it seems to have gone away. But when I talk at some conferences, I see people, and they have a headset that looks just like this, but on their eye. And they look like a cyborg. They look like a robot. And the reason they look so strange is because we don't have a great social precedent for wearing a computer on your face. Okay? It looks very tricky. It looks unknown. And therefore, we stay away from it. Eventually, we will have things like computers in glasses, okay? But eventually is a long time. Think about the Bluetooth headset that you might see. That's a baby step on the way towards social precedent. Google Glass was just too early, and so it didn't have product market fit. The third idea of product market fit is focused on an opportunity for engagement. Think about the products that you engage with and what the word engagement means. It's about attention. You're giving me your attention, and that's worth a lot. In fact, it's the rarest thing you have to give me because it's your time. Okay? And I appreciate that. That means that this conference has the opportunity for engagement. Okay? It has product market fit in the context of a service. Okay? People want to give you their attention, they want to engage. Okay? Product market fit is broad. It's about having broad reach. Okay? But on the other side of product market fit is something that's much more specific. And these are behavioral insights. A behavioral insight is about the way that people behave, how they act, and how you can start to change that behavior, again, over time. The first idea of a behavioral insight is related to value. Think again about this conference, about you giving me your attention and the expectation that you have in return. Okay? You've paid a lot of money, or your company's paid a lot of money for you to be here. And there's an expectation of value, a value promise that the organizers and me and the other speakers have said, if you pay this money, we promise you you will get value in return. And the trick is that each one of you will view value differently. Value might be hearing speakers. It might be networking. It might be the free coffee. Okay? It's hard to tell because people have a different perspective on value, and that is why behavioral insights are so difficult to capture in mass. They're specific. The next idea of a behavioral insight is focused on identity. And identity is about the way you see yourself, but it's also a way that you aspirationally see yourself, how you would like to see yourself in the perfect light. Is it success? Is it beauty? Is it fun? Is it joy? Okay. And these are things that if you can embed in a product, imagine how that product can then reflect on you. Think about social media not as a way of sharing photos, but as a way of projecting an aspirational sense of self. Okay? If you have a teenager and have watched them use something like Instagram or Snapchat, it's an aspirational view. It's not necessarily a realistic view. Can your products entice people to have that? And the third idea of a behavioral insight is the one that I find most interesting. It's a provocation. Okay? It says the world would be better if. Okay? It's a what if. And in fact, Google Glass was a provocation. It wasn't the right one at the right time, but it provoked us to think differently about ourselves, the culture around us, and the way that we think of products and services. Okay, so if we unpack the idea of a behavioral insight, you end up with these different ideas. And if you unpack them in the context of that product market fit, you get to a place where this needs to be managed. This entire idea of product market fit and behavioral insight comes from a place called product management, which is not the idea of managing requirements in a spreadsheet. It's something different. It's something more magical. And again, we talked about this idea of where it comes from a little bit, but I want to talk about this shift that I'm seeing, that I bet you're feeling. Because for a while, product management was brought to us by technology. Okay, and these were companies like Microsoft and Google, where technologists wrote the specification, literally wrote the code, and therefore said, this is what the product will do. And they were in charge of what it will do. And so they made it do things that they felt good about. They optimized it for efficiency. Okay? They made it algorithmically sound. They wrote clean code. And it makes a lot of sense that they valued those things because those are the things they're good at. Okay? There's a different perspective that you might find in companies in the United States like Procter & Gamble or Johnson & Johnson. The notion of a brand manager managing what the product does. And in this context, they look externally at the market and they say, what is the competition doing? What are pricing strategies? How is the market starting to change? Okay, and again, it makes sense that they would look to those things because those are things they value. They went and got an MBA and learned good business practice around those things. But there's a shift, and there's this new idea of product management by design. And design is a hard word because it's wrapped up in this context of other things, okay? And I think that it's coming from these other things like this. Like putting design on the cover of magazines like Business Week and equating it to innovation. If you have design, you have innovation. If you have design, you have success in new and novel ways. And I'm willing to bet you've heard terms like design thinking that are typically not substantiated by substance because it's so ethereal and hard to understand. I think these are also being driven by conferences like TED or PopTech, where people hear very influential speakers who have changed and molded their companies through creativity and through design. And maybe you've gone to one of those and you said, I want to have some of that. Okay? But how do you get some of that? That's the tricky part. Okay? And it's difficult to understand where it's coming from, but I think the biggest trend that's pushing this is this. That there's this overwhelming amount of technology in our lives, like this, a digital toilet connected to the internet for who knows what reason. And if you look at the world through this lens, the world is strange. Man, the world is weird. You have these objects and artifacts that don't necessarily tell you how to use them, what they're for, why you would want them in your life, and you struggle to integrate them. Okay? And maybe you watch other people and you say, all right, they seem to be comfortable with this. I can get comfortable with this. It adds productivity. It makes my life better. But how does it actually fit into the cultural fabric of buildings and restaurants and vehicles and the way you live your life? It's strange, and we don't have a good model for dealing with how to handle these, how to integrate them into our perspective. And so if we look at all of this, you see a shift. You see a shift for designers, and I'm willing to bet this shift has an equivalent for engineers and people who lead businesses from tactical ideas. Tactical ideas. For a designer, they want to be good at these things. They learned in design school about aesthetics. They looked at Philippe Starck and learned to make things beautiful. And they learned about usability engineering and to make things foolproof. And they learned about information architecture. And so that's a set of tactics. And those are tactics that designers cling to. They say, I want to be good at those things. And at the same time, there's this emergent view of strategy. And it's a certain kind of strategy. It focuses on the ideas of innovation, newness. But what kind of newness? Disruption. What does that mean? And the idea of having engagement, eyeballs, stickiness, like these words are so bizarre. Engagement, what does that mean? And so design wants to be strategic. And therein is that design thinking. And the problem is you can't have one without the other. You can't have design as a strategy without design as a series of tactics. And so you end up with this discipline in the middle, this idea of product management by design. And this is something new, but it's not necessarily something that's out of reach. Let's talk about the good qualities of a product manager from this perspective. And again, this is a synthesis of what I learned from all of these people who are doing this in very successful companies and startups. I talked to Josh Ellman, who's a partner at Greylock. It's a venture capital firm in San Francisco that has led a number of different companies that you've heard of. Josh was an early employee at LinkedIn. And he says, to be a good product manager, you need to be a good storyteller. Okay, this is different than a good requirements manager, right? You need to see a vision and tell stories about it to other people so that they get excited about the future you see. Okay, and so for Josh, it's the ability to tell stories, and these stories are an optimistic future. If only my product existed, the world would be better, and here's why. Come along with me to make that product, to make that world better. Okay, to be a good storyteller. My friend Frank Lyman said he toggles between his rational brain, okay, a way of saying like, here's what the competition's doing, here's the way to think about the market, but also this intuitive, emotional feel. And for him, it's about gathering signals, okay, looking at the world around him and seeing little bits over here and a little bit over there and merging them, perhaps even while he sleeps, bringing these signals together and synthesizing them into a greater whole. And so there's an ability to look at the right signals and start to capture them and synthesize them. Another quality of a good product manager comes from Mark Phillip. That was the CEO who spent 7 years making no money and now has a successful company. He said, it's important to practice making people talkative. Be interested, not interesting. And think about how that manifests in a conversation. Hello, my name is John. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Tell me about what you do. Tell me more. Explore that more. This isn't, let me tell you what I do. Okay? Mark has a funny technique for practicing this. He says when, I don't know if they do this in France, when a telemarketer calls you on the phone, selling something that you don't necessarily want, instead of hanging up, keep them on the phone as long as you can. Ask them about their children. Where do you go to school? How's your city? What's the weather? Practice extracting information from people. Fourth idea of how you become good at product management comes from my friend Gary Chow, who was the GM at Union Square Ventures, another VC out of New York City, early investors in things like Twitter. And Gary said, it's actually about curiosity. Product management is about wanting to know. And it's a curiosity not necessarily about your topic, your discipline, your vertical. It's a curiosity of the world. It's a broad curiosity of the way the world works. And for Gary, it's this sort of innate thirst to learn. Okay? It's about learning. And sort of the last, if you're keeping track here of these, what makes a good product manager comes from Alex Raynard, again, head of product at Foursquare. And he says, for better or worse, product management sits at the center of a wheel. And you have to negotiate with all of these different disciplines. You don't necessarily have a carrot, and you don't necessarily have a stick. Let's see if that colloquialism works in France. But somehow you have to cajole people, you have to urge people to go in the direction that you want to go in. Okay? And for me, when I think about that, it's this idea of being affable, to helping drive people in a direction so they feel empowered. All right, here's a good checklist. Here's how maybe one can become a good product manager. So what does a product manager do? This is the half of the talk where it's not conceptual. I want to be really, really tactical and give you a number of different things you can go do in order to practice this. And at the center of it, I want to illustrate this with a case study of MyEDU. I mentioned that I was at a startup that got acquired. MyEDU attempts to address two specific problems in the United States, which I think are starting to be worldwide. In the United States, there's a six-year graduation rate of 59% in higher education. Okay? That means that 59% of students take 6 years to graduate. The rest take longer or don't graduate at all. And if that wasn't problematic enough, this is the cost. And so they're going into personal debt that in the United States you can't bankrupt out of. You carry it forever at these rates. That's a big problem. Okay? That's the problem that we set out to solve or to help. And MyEDU has a very simple value promise to students. We said that we would help you succeed in college, tell your story, and get a job. Okay, seems simple enough. This was at the heart of the product, and it's a profile. It's a highly visual profile. It might be similar to something like LinkedIn. It highlights your accomplishments. But if you think about being in university, you don't have very many accomplishments. And so these students create LinkedIn profiles that says, 2014, graduated from college. And that's it. And so we created a profile where you can put things that you accomplished in college, in university, so that you look great to employers, so that employers can come find you and offer you jobs based on the things that you're already excelling at. And I want to walk through a series of different tactics that we used to get there. Okay? And I'll group them into these 4 areas. And I hope that these are things you can go implement right away. And the first starts with this idea of contextual ethnographic research. We become anthropologists, although an anthropologist would tell me that what I'm doing is terrible. Okay? We become anthropologists and we go into the field and we study people. And we study college students because we create work for college students. We go in their dorm rooms and their apartments and we look through their bags and they walk us around in their rooms and we see all of the things they're doing. We watch TV with them. Sometimes we watch them do drugs. And we learn what it's like to feel like a college student. And I'll offer you a quick anecdote from Samantha, who you see here. Samantha said, your resume, it's like your life. It's your golden ticket to the chocolate factory. I like to put customer service and management things and stuff like that on my resume. Everyone has a business degree these days. I'll always be able to get a job. I found out about international business from a guy at the Gap. I didn't even know what it was. I Googled it, and it sounded better than just regular business, so I chose that. Samantha says, my decisions are based on stupid things. And I don't say that story to ridicule Samantha because Samantha is the norm. Samantha is not the exception. Samantha is making decisions based on somewhat arbitrary data, and so are most of the college students that we look at. I'll give you a flip side of this. This is a purple squirrel, and there aren't very many of those. This is hanging on the office in a recruiter's office, and the recruiter says, I'm so specific, I'm looking for a purple squirrel. Looking at all the candidates, and that's how specific I'm going to be. And when we talk to recruiters and do the same sort of ethnographic research with them, one of them said to us, students, they say, I could do anything. I could do this, hire me for whatever you got. And she said, don't tell me that. You couldn't say anything worse to a recruiter because they want that purple squirrel. And so the method here that you can go leverage is very, very simple. Go spend time with the people that you're trying to help. And don't do focus groups, and don't do interviews, and don't do questionnaires. Go watch them live. Spend time with them and gain empathy. Try to feel what it's like to be Samantha. Don't just understand what it's like to be Samantha. Okay, so we talk to college students and we spend time with them. And then we have a whole bunch of data. We transcribe, we write down every single thing they say, and these take about 3 or 4 hours each, and we'll probably do 15 or 20 of these, and so we have all of this data, we type it all. And this is what our war rooms start to look like, and I'll zoom in on some of these. Every single one of these is an utterance. It's something someone said. And you end up with, 500, 800, 1,000 of these all around you. Why would we spend so much time typing what people said? Their voice is in your head now, and you can channel it. You can leverage it. I can hear Samantha in my head right now, even though she's not here. And talk about building empathy and seeing the world from her perspective. Okay? And so we can build empathy by typing these up, and when we type them up, then we group them. And we spend days and days and days moving them around and reading them and saying, are these connected somehow? Yeah, they are. Let's put them over here on the wall. And this process could go on forever. It literally could go on forever. And at some point we say, okay, that's enough. Let's do something with it. Okay? And when we do something with it, we move from this stage, this idea of synthesizing data, identifying anomalies, looking for patterns, into the next stage. And this next stage is the key to the whole thing. we try to arrive at behavioral insights. A behavioral insight captures everything you heard and summarizes. And I'll give you an example. Samantha said, your resume is like your life. It's your golden ticket to the chocolate factory. And for her, she emphasizes bullets. I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this. It's just a bulleted list. And she thinks she should have this broad view, this broad ownership. And so we'll craft this insight for Samantha that says, students think they have an idea of what a candidate wants, what employers want in a candidate, and they're often wrong. Okay, she has this preconceived idea of what it will take to get a job. On the other side, for recruiters, we'll go back to what Meg said. Don't apply to 5 of my jobs. You're not going to get any of them. Okay, you have to be specific. She's looking for the purple squirrel. Okay, and she's going to create this mental narrative of what a student is like based on very little data. And so for Meg, we'll create and craft this insight that says recruiters make snap judgments, and these judgments directly impact a candidate's chance of success. So think about these insights. They're provocative statements of truth about human behavior. They're based on a very small biased sample, qualitative, yet we're going to state them, we're going to assert them as if they're true globally. And there is our innovation risk. We just inserted risk into an otherwise rigorous objective process, and we said, all right, I'm going to make a leap that is not necessarily a logical leap. It's an emotional leap. These insights will now become the building blocks, and the way you get to these insights is very easy. You ask why, and you answer it. And you answer it with incomplete data. You answer it based on your intuition. And because you're leveraging your intuition, you may be wrong, and because you're wrong, you may fail. Okay? Let's say you continue the process. Then we get into this notion of a value promise or a value proposition. If we look and remember how we framed students say things like, I don't know how to show skills. I'm not even sure I have skills. And I certainly don't understand how the hiring process works. The recruiter says things like, I'm looking for that purple squirrel. I need to see evidence that you're doing anything of worthwhile. And by the way, I'm very busy. Don't waste my time. I'm a very, very busy person. Recruiters are very busy. And so we arrive at this question. Okay, we arrive at a what-if opportunity. What if this startup helped students identify their skills and present them to recruiters in a credible way? Well, let's flip that on its side and assert it as if it is true. And we will say, our value promise is to help students identify their skills and present them to recruiters in a credible way. And now we have a business opportunity. Now we have a container upon which we can judge what we do. And we can decide if things are good ideas or bad ideas. And to get there, we tell stories. We tell stories of the existing situation, and we tell stories of that optimistic future of how the world might be if only our product existed. From here, it gets very pragmatic very quickly. Okay? We do things like identify features, and for us, we told stories about all the different things somebody might do in order to visualize their skills. Okay, this is simple feature brainstorming now. Maybe they identify their skills in a list and they visualize a portfolio and they show these are the things I'm good at. And because we're resource constrained, we're a startup, we couldn't do everything. And we said, all right, what's the smallest path to getting from a student identifying a skill to showing it to an employer? I said, this is the path we'll use. In this very pragmatic phase, I don't know if anyone recognizes Jira as a defect and story tracking software, but if you are in fact a worker bee at a company, you live inside of a tool like this. We write user stories. These are the things a user might do when they use our software, and we create mock-ups like this, high-fidelity visuals that show this is what the software might look like. Okay? And now we're in very, very practical, pragmatic feature development, which I think people are starting to understand in a very, very systematic way. And so I won't spend too much time on that. And then we launch it. Then we release the thing to the world. Off it goes. And when we launch it, we build in a report like this. So every single day, we get an email that says, here's how we're doing. We were tracking number of tiles, the tiles on that profile, those square tiles that explain a skill, because the thought being the more tiles, the more facets that an employer can search across. and the better likely they are to find that perfect purple squirrel candidate. And so every day in email, everyone in the company gets this report, in this case saying, hey, we have new profiles, we have new tiles, here's how we're doing. And that gives us telemetry so that we can better understand progress and how we're achieving our goals. And how are we achieving our goals? Here are the things that students put on their profile. Students are apparently very, very good at Microsoft because they put things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Office, and Windows, and I didn't even know this still existed, but Microsoft Works. Who knew? Okay, so we learn that data because every single day we get an update that tells us what students are doing. We build that into the product development process. It's not extra, okay? It's fundamental to understanding how your product is performing. And then we iterate. We do it again, okay? We do it again. We go back to our roadmap. We took stuff out because we didn't have time. We'll build it back in. We'll do some more stuff. In this case, we said we could suggest skills based on other things you may have learned. We can do an end of the semester or year questionnaire to students and say, how did you like this class? How did the professor do? And by the way, what did you learn? And they can say things like, I learned Microsoft Works, and they'll type it in there. And then we learn about that. And we can help them with a type ahead by saying, other people have started to say things like Microsoft Works, is that what you meant? Okay. They can showcase the things they've learned through a portfolio that looks a little bit like this. And this is what it would look like complete. This is mine. I'm showcasing design. I have a video that you can go watch. I show some of my work experiences, my internships and co-ops. You can add new skills. Okay, and we did some usability testing to understand that, in fact, students didn't think they had skills, so we'll help them out by giving them some supporting text. Again, very, very tactical. We're talking now the basics of shipping software. And this is what they end up looking like. They create a profile that has tiles, and the tiles are based on the skills they have. And for some of the skills, we started to create them as sort of exciting. We had the designers spend a couple days making like more fun tiles, where if you happen to type in dance, instead of getting the gray tile, the standard tile, it would be like a little more exciting and maybe animated. So something for you to search for and find as sort of little magic moments. And so the method here, very, very tactical. Build a roadmap and hack away at that roadmap, right? Start to identify features and capabilities and try them. And iterate, and iterate, and iterate. And then we get to a part of product management that designers are very, very uncomfortable with, actually communicating the value to the world, a strategy for communication. We tried something. We tried an experiment where at the end of the year, we sent students an email that looked like this. And we said, one student took a class, and he said, I learned this particular skill, UV vis spectrophotometry in chemistry. And we say to the student, you took the same class. Did you learn that skill too? And the student could say, yes, I did. And it would automatically add the tile to their profile. And we tried it. And we tried it with a very, very small group of our students. And this is an email from the product manager, the BA, explaining why it didn't work. And they said, we tried it and it failed. And here's why. We sent it to about 2,100 students. We received 440 opens. 53 students clicked on it. Terrible. It didn't work. And that's why we sent it to a small group instead of to 2 million college students. And so the process now becomes trying very small ways of communicating new capabilities and new features to a prospective audience. The last piece of this process is around gaining feedback from the audience and starting to understand, did things work in their perspective? And so what you're looking at here is a help desk tool. It's just an off-the-shelf package called, I don't even remember what it's called Zendesk. And we purchased it and we integrated it into our product. And what you're seeing here is a support ticket where a student asked a question, and because it's a startup, I was the face of customer service for a little while. So I would answer the support tickets. And this student said, where can I see a list of which skills have their own dedicated images? Like the little piano image, right? They wanted to type in their things. He said, I'm obsessive like that. I found 5 on my own, but surely there are more. And I wrote back and said, thanks for writing. We like the magic of the surprise. You'll have to discover the other ones. And I put a little winky face. And he didn't like that. He rated my support answer bad. He said, I'm unsatisfied. And so the technique here is to ensure that every single member of the team receives all of the customer feedback, okay? So that they're very in tune to what students and your users are feeling. And so we end up with this process, and I want to tell you the end of the story. We were acquired by Blackboard. MyEDU is 20-something people, 24 people. Blackboard is a 2,000-person software company. It's the biggest educational software company in the world that has approximately 45 million college students on it. And talk about culture shock, okay? Small startup, giant company, no process, total crazy, a lot of process, not very crazy. But I want to show you what happens when your startup gets acquired by the largest player in the space. When we were a startup, we were averaging about 2,000 profiles a day. So 2,000 new students would come to our product a day. And when we got acquired by Blackboard, this happened. Okay? And we got to about 18,000 new profiles a day. The dip is because of the annual course registration process, right? And so, crazy. Imagine you're receiving all of the customer feedback. Well, you just got 8 times as much customer feedback, right? Okay. And we were able to extend our visual language. You remember the visual style of our products? Well, we were able to introduce that into all of Blackboard's products. And I want to show you a quick illustration of what that looks like. Because when we were acquired, Blackboard software was enterprise software and looked like things like PeopleSoft or Oracle. Okay, and we changed that because we took the same empathetic feeling, the feeling of how students approach their education, okay, the same feeling that came from qualitative research, and we started to embed that product language into our products. And so this is not just a strategic competency. This way of thinking becomes a tactical execution quality as well. It embeds itself in things like aesthetics, the experience that people have, the way you think about product extensions across multiple devices. Okay? We started to include very subtle nuance that you would not necessarily think to have in educational software because it related to the feeling of anxiety that students had that we learned by spending time with them. We started to extend this across all of our product lines into our video collaboration software, okay, across our learning and grading. And we started to think about the products we built in a fundamentally different way, that those products could be fun, that they could be playful, and still have academic educational value. And that applying something that students would gain benefit from doesn't necessarily mean that the product needs to be boring. Okay, so we talked about the idea of product inside of this very, very simple construct. And maybe you're sitting there and you're saying, I hope, I would like to do that. How do I do it? Well, I'll leave you with the ideas that I heard again from the folks that I talked to. Okay, Joe Gebbia said, throw yourself into an experience of making. Okay, think about what it's like, again, to make things. Leland Richis, who was the head of product at Kickstarter, said, you have to have experience making things. Okay? And Gary Chow said, go make something. And so it's clear that to get to product management by design, you need to make things. Today we talked about product market fit as being that very important broad view of how your products will be adopted. We talked about the notion of behavioral insights as being the very specific, emotionally charged and empathetic nuance to the way that people view their lives. And we talked about shipping. We talked about actually getting product out the door. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you.